What's up, guys? Jomo here. Just watching a Joe Rogan podcast with Tristan Harris, who is starred in The Social Dilemma. Really smart guy, and I just wanted to play some of the podcast and give my thoughts on what he's talking about. So leading up to this point, he's talking about how basically social media is designed in a way where only the clickbaity, um, exciting, dramatic things that um, get a lot of attention and keep a lot of attention are the things that are pushed up in the algorithms on the social media networks. And so it creates this vicious cycle of people consistently being incentivized to put out things like TikTok or put out mean tweets or things that get a lot of people worked up because um, what it's doing is it's harnessing that part of our brains that is triggered by negativity. He was mentioning that humans have a negativity bias where it's kind of like when you're driving down the highway and you look at the accident on the side of the road. So we've basically been immersed in a culture of social media that is playing on this part of our brain and is taking advantage of it. And therefore, it's basically hijacked our sense of reason. It's hijacked our sense of ability to think clearly. It's hijacked our sense of knowing what's really true in the world. And I think it's really dangerous what's happening with social media. He was also talking about how, the people who have the most followers because they're buying into this. They're buying into this incentive structure. I mean, it's like, what other option do we have in this current environment? So I think he's about to get into, or he started talking about some solutions and ways that we can improve upon this this dilemma that we're in, for lack of a better word. It is a dilemma. I think it is a problem. I've seen it personally as someone who built a following on social media and then lost the following, not for any reason other than I think I didn't buy into these games that social media influencers play, and because of that, basically I got trampled on by the algorithms that was pushing up content that was controversial and basically pushing down content that people really need to see and hear and think about and talk about. That's personally what I've noticed is what's happening in the landscape of social media. So I thought it would be interesting to share some of what he's talking about, share my ideas and thoughts about this, and I'd love to hear your feedback as well on if this is a problem that you think is affecting you, and also any kind of solutions that you propose to improve the system. So yeah, I'll just start playing it, and if there's something that I want to comment on, I'll pause the video.
As you said, technology is only going to get more immersed into our lives and infused into our lives, not less. Is technology going to get more persuasive or less persuasive?
More.
Oh, and I have this on like a pretty fast setting, so hold on, I'll slow it down for those of you guys. I'll put it on 1.5. For those of you guys who can't keep up with the 1.75, because I usually listen to things on 1.75 or 2, but so I'm just going to speed it up. It's at 1.5 right now.
More persuasive. Is AI going to get better at predicting our next move or less good at predicting our next move?
It's almost like we have to eliminate that. And I mean, it would be really hard to tell them you can't use algorithms anymore that depend on people's attention spans.
Right.
It would be really hard, but it seems like the only way for the internet to be pure.
Correct. I think of this like the environmental movement. I mean, some people have compared the film The Social Dilemma to Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. right? Where that was the book that birthed the environmental movement. And that was in a Republican administration, the Nixon administration. We created the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. We went from a world where we said the environment's something we don't pay attention to we passed I forgot the laws we passed between 1963 and 1972. Over a decade, we started caring about the environment. We created things that protected the national parks. And I think that's kind of what's going on here, that, imagine, for example, it is illegal to show advertising on youth-oriented social media apps between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. because you're basically monetizing loneliness and lack of sleep, right? Like, imagine that you cannot advertise during those hours because we say, like a national park, our children's attention this is a very minimal example, but this would be like, taking the most obvious piece of low-hanging fruit and land and say, let's quarantine this off and say this is sacred.
But isn't the problem, like, the Environmental Protection Agency, it resonates with most people.
So in the documentary, he actually mentioned that thing he was talking about of basically making it illegal, or, putting some kind of fine in place for showing manipulative content or manipulative advertising between the hours of 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. because that's when people are most sleepy, most subject to being manipulated and, not thinking clearly. So I thought that was a really good point that he made in the movie, and he just made it right there. And I think that is a big problem, that they have the late night advertising, which preys on people's inability to make clear, rational decisions at that point in their life. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that is like a really good idea. I thought was a really good idea.
Let's protect the world for our children.
Right.
There's not a lot of people profiting off of polluting the rivers.
Right.
But when you look,
there's over hunting, certain lands, or overfishing certain fisheries and collapsing them. I mean, there are, if you have big enough corporations that are based on an infinite growth profit model, operating with less and less, resources to get, this is a problem we faced before.
For sure. But it's not the same sort of scale as 300 and X amount of millions of people, and a vast majority of them are using some form of social media. And also, this is not something that really resonates in a very clear, like 1 + 1 = 2 way. Like the Environmental Protection Agency, it makes sense. Like if you ask people,
right,
should you be able to throw garbage into the ocean? Everyone's going to say, no, that's a terrible idea.
Right.
Should you be able to make an algorithm that shows people what they're interested in on YouTube? Like, yeah, what's wrong with that?
Well, it's more like sugar, right? Because sugar is always going to taste way better than something else because our evolutionary heritage says, like, that's rare, and so we should pay more attention to it. This is like sugar for the fame lottery, for attention, for social approval. And so it's always going to feel good, and we need to have consciousness about it. And we haven't banned sugar, but we have created a new conversation about what healthy, eating is, right? I mean, there's a whole new fitness movement and sort of yoga and all these other things that people care more about their bodies and health than they probably ever have. I think many of us wouldn't have thought we'd ever reach it through, get through the period of soda being at the sort of pinnacle popularity that is. I think in 2013 or 14 was the year that water crossed over as being more of a successful drinking product than soda, I think.
Really?
I think that's true. You might want to look that up. But so I think we could have something like that here. We have to, I think of it this way, if you want to even get kind of weirdly, I don't know, spiritual or something about it, which is we are the only species that could even know that we were doing this to ourselves.
Right.
Like we're the only species with the capacity for self-awareness to know that we have actually like roped ourselves into this matrix of, like literally the matrix, of sort of undermining our own psychological weaknesses. Like a lion that somehow manipulated its environment so that there's gazelles everywhere and is like overeating on gazelles doesn't have the self-awareness to know, wait a second, if we keep doing this, this is going to cause all these other problems. It can't do that because its brain doesn't have that capacity. Our brain, we do have the capacity for self-awareness. We can name negativity bias, which is that if I have 100 comments and 99 are positive, my brain goes to the negative. We can name that, and once we're aware of it, we get some agency back. We can name that we have a draw towards social approval. So when I see I've been tagged in a photo, I know that they're just manipulating my social approval. We can name social reciprocity, which is when I get all those text messages and I feel, oh, I have to get back to all these people. Well, that's just an inbuilt bias that we have to get back reciprocity. We have to get back to people who do give stuff to us. The more we name our own biases, like confirmation bias, we can name that my brain is more likely to feel good getting information that I already agree with than information that disagrees with me. Once I know that about myself, I can get more agency back. Yeah. And we're the only like species that we know of that has the capacity to realize that we're in a self-terminating sort of system, and we have to change that by understanding our own weaknesses, and that we've created the system that is undermining ourselves. And I think the film is doing that for a lot of people.
It certainly is.
So yeah, I think that was actually a really brilliant point that he was making, that we do have the capacity to shift the tide on these phenomenons that humans created, or I mean, not that humans created, but well, yeah, I guess it is human created as far as the social media platforms themselves. But as far as like the innate human instincts that we have, those aren't human created. I mean, maybe they are at some point. Maybe humans created them at some point as a coping mechanism. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is the self-awareness that humans have that other creatures don't have, I think it gives me hope in that we can learn from our mistakes. we can become aware of the fact that the choices that we're making aren't the right choices. We need to make different choices. And I think if we can basically go down rabbit holes of uh, choices that we're making that need to be fixed, if basically we follow the thread of every single action that we take, kind of like what he was saying with the gazettes, where, and because I see this a lot in American culture, is like we're supposedly like the richest culture in the world, or one of the richest, and yet um, something like 60 or 70% of people live paycheck to paycheck. How does that make sense? It makes sense because the top 1% are essentially hoarding all of the resources that exist in this culture, leaving so many other people with so much less. And then if you extrapolate that out to the entire world, you realize, wait a minute, the way that our culture has so much more than every other culture oftentimes is a result of us pulling those resources from the other countries, other cultures, and because of that, there's a lot of consequences to the environment and to the people, the civilizations in those countries and cultures. And so we have to acknowledge the harm that we're causing in order for us to move forward. And I think that that is an existential exercise that we all must take if this is really if things are going to change. We have to become more aware of the effects that our causes are creating. Every action has a reaction. So we have to figure out what is the cause, or what are the actions that we're taking that are causing the effects, or what are the actions, what are the effects, and how can we take different actions to get better effects, to get more humane effects where people aren't suffering as a result of our exploitation. So this is really just this is like definitely an existential question that yeah, like I'm saying, I think humanity really needs to contend with and deal with, particularly Americans and those who are well off in this world right now. So I think he's making a really good point here.
But I think it needs more. It's like inspiration. It needs a refresher on a regular basis.
Right.
Do you feel this massive obligation to be that guy that is out there, sort of as the Paul Revere of the technology influence invasion?
I just see these problems and I want them to go away.
Yeah.
Didn't desire and wake up to run a social movement, but honestly, right now, that's what we're trying to do with the Center for Humane Technology. We realized that before the success of the film, we were actually more focused on working with technologists inside the industry. I come from Silicon Valley. Many of my friends are executives at the companies, and we have these inside relationships. So we focused at that level. We also worked with policymakers, and we were trying to speak to policymakers. We weren't trying to mobilize the whole world against this problem. But with the film, suddenly we as an organization have had to do that. And frankly, I wish we had, I'm just being really honestly, I really wish we'd had those funnels so that people who saw the film could have landed into a carefully designed funnel where we actually started mobilizing people to deal with this issue. Because there are ways we can do it. We can pass certain laws. We have to have a new cultural sort of set of norms about how do we want to show up and use the system. Families and schools can have whole new protocols of how do we want to do group migrations. Because one of the problems is that if a teenager says by themselves, whoa, I saw the film, I'm going to delete my Instagram account by myself or TikTok account by myself. That's not enough because all their friends are still using Instagram and TikTok, and they're still going to talk about who's dating who or gossip about this or homework or whatever on those services. And so
That's a really good point. Like, yeah, because the film, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but the film, it basically encouraged people to turn off their social media, disconnect from social media. Um, but then it's like if that's your primary means of communication, I mean, you could still text friends and stuff and let them know, what you've done, that you've disabled your social media, and like texting is the only way that you can be communicated with. Which, I mean, actually, that is kind of effective if you think about it. It's like, um, although I mean, like texting is kind of part of the problem, but it's not as much of a problem as like the social network phenomenon that he talks a lot about. Like I still think like communication through text or email, while it is kind of harmful on some level, it's it's useful in that we can communicate ideas, and it's the next best alternative to talking face to face with someone. So I think it's a useful tool. It can also be overutilized and people can become addicted to it. So there's always that issue. But I think as far as from like a pure standpoint, as far as like pure communication, I think it's relatively useful. Um, so yeah, I would say that a solution might be to um, have people like disconnect their social media and then email or text their friends to let them know I disconnected my social media because I watched this documentary, um, and maybe they can point people to the documentary, and then more people would then be interested in disconnecting their social media. So, but as far as like this is like a good step that people can take, but it's not going to solve the problem, because obviously there's still going to be a lot of people that don't do what their friends do and still remain addicted to social media, and these platforms will continue. So something has to be done internally with these social media platforms in order to make them less addictive. And the thing that I mean, partially he was mentioning it, but I think to take it a step further beyond what he was talking about, this was actually before I started making this video, um, is he was talking about how, uh, I guess I kind of mentioned it before. Here, I'm just gonna, because I was taking some notes. So yeah, I would say so what the social media platforms are doing, like I said before, is like it's highlighting the uh it basically takes people down an echo chamber of one side of the coin. So the reason he was saying that our society is so polarized right now is because everyone is living in echo chambers on these social media platforms. And so what ends up happening when you live in these echo chambers is you don't see the other side of the coin. And that ends up, you know, polarizing people, where people take one stance and they don't see the other side of the stance. So a solution would be to have these social media companies um, suggest, like for example, YouTube. When you're on YouTube, you go down a rabbit hole of, let's say, like 9/11 conspiracy, you're going to keep getting videos that reaffirm the fact that 9/11 was an inside job. Now, what what a better approach would be is to also suggest videos showing why it wasn't an inside job and why those conspiracy theories have been debunked by other people. So people can be more um, like they can see both sides of the coin and they can make up their own mind rather than being consistently led in one particular direction by the narratives that the media that they're consuming, that is being fed to them, is casting. So yeah, I would say like that's a good solution as far as like how to make things better on these platforms, is to give people both sides of to give people multiple perspectives rather than just one perspective, because no topic is black and white. And yet what a lot of people feel, where a lot of issues are concerned these days, is that it's black, it's white, it's Republican, it's Democrat. You know, it's that's not the reality of life. There's nuance that completely gets disregarded when when people learn in a one-sided way. And I get that like people only have so much time, they can only learn so much, but I'd rather them, if they were given two 10-minute videos, I'd rather them be given one 10-minute video that is on the one side and one 10-minute video that's on the other side, rather than two 10-minute videos that are on the one side. So that's just my thoughts on how the algorithm can be corrected and amended to prevent the polarization that's taking place as a result of these echo chambers of content. And the media companies are doing it because they want people's attention, and they think that if they keep giving people more and more evidence that their perspective is right, that they'll keep consuming and keep staying on the platform, and they'll maintain their attention. Whereas I actually think they can hold just as much, if not more, attention when people start questioning both sides versus, oh, well, it has to be just one side because everyone that I'm watching, every video I'm watching is telling me it's this one side. So I think we can have a more nuanced population that, you know, that respects both sides, that can, you know, have more civil dialogue and civil conversations because both sides are being considered. So that is, I think, a really good solution to this problem. I think I might actually just end this video there because I think that got a point across that I really wanted to get across. And it's basically that the reason I think we're in this situation right now that we're in today, and today is actually, it's 1 a.m. right now of election day. So it's after the first day of election, or not the first day, but the election today. So it's on November 4th right now that I'm recording this at 1 a.m. And what's happening in this country in terms of how people are being divided is because of this phenomenon that I'm talking right here about. And it's, you know, people who are on Biden's side think Trump is the worst. People who are on Trump's side think Biden's the worst. And that polarization obviously creates, you know, one group of people that's going to vote for one person, one group of people that's going to vote for another person. But what it doesn't do is bring humanity together. And instead, what it does is it puts us against each other. And I think that's the biggest issue with politics as it exists today, is it's not about who's solving the problems that the country is facing the better. It's who, you know, does someone like the most. You know, like it's kind of like celebrity culture. And I mean, it makes sense that Trump is kind of the epitome of celebrity culture, and he's causing this polarization, or at least like him being on one side is contributing to this polarization. So yeah, I would say this is really a topic that that needs to be focused on, and a problem that needs to be solved in some way. And I'd love to hear if anyone has any thoughts or ideas about how to solve this problem. So feel free to put it in the comments below, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. All right, stay well, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.